Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and I am recording this 1 week away from my big summer drop. I've been teasing it out. Get ready for it. Next week, please tune in. I'm so excited. I'm just going to get this out of the way at the top. Tune in, give it a listen. It is, as of this recording, absolutely not complete. And there's still a lot of work to do. But actually, I put in a lot of hours on it over the 4th of July weekend. And I got a lot of the foundational tracks laid down. And I think it's coming together nicely. I'm certainly enamored with myself. Let's put it that way. I think it's funny. I think it's charming. The voice talent on it is knockout, absolutely superb. People brought their A game for this project. So I can't wait for you guys to hear it. So that is coming up next Wednesday. If you're a new listener, welcome aboard. This is the podcast where I, Joe Slepsky, go over every issue of GIJOE Real American Hero in sequential order. Previously, we went over every episode of the Sunbow cartoon and the DIC cartoon and the Extreme cartoon. And we'll be getting back to those cartoons sooner or later. Honestly, based on the fact that we're already at 131 for GIJOE, which is crazy. That's today's issue is 131. The original Real American Hero Marvel series, you only ran 155. So I have a strong feeling we're just going to run out this run, and then we'll jump back into some of the animated stuff. We've talked before. We did. It's Scott Reed on. We talked a little bit about the Dark Horse GIJOE comics. So maybe I'll circle back and give those a full treatment, a full Joe and Joe Illustrated treatment, etc., and so on. But that is down the road. Right now, I got my eyes on the prize, and that is a looming deadline to finish next week's project. I almost said it. I almost said what it is. Okay. All right. Well, we're just going to move on. I'm giddy with excitement and way too pleased with myself than I should be. So I hope you guys are going to enjoy it, though. I don't mean to build it up too much. So, but if you are new listeners, or if you guys are revisiting listeners, and you've never given this show a rate or review, please do so. Go on your podcatcher and give it however many stars you feel it deserves. I appreciate all the stars you give, be it 1, be it 5, be it 3. 2 stars, I'm a little like, really, 2 stars? It's either terrible or it's middle of the road. Really, what's 2 stars? And then 4 stars is like, you can do better, which I do appreciate that. I actually do appreciate that. So anyway, but whatever you guys feel like doing is great. If you're on social media, which I don't know why you would be on social media these days, life is social media does not bring out the best in human beings. Let's put it that way. But if you are on social media, please follow me at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Joe on Joe Pod. You can send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com. That is if you want to help contribute to the show, or if you want to chat about GIJOE, or just send along you suck, or send along you're great, or send along, man, I can't believe you did that with your special episode next week, because that is not what I was expecting to hear. And boy, did I love it, or boy, did I hate it, but I still listened all the way through because I couldn't take my ears off it because it was fabulous. Whatever you feel like doing, I appreciate you. So let's see. So that HasLab, that His Tank, that's just sweeping the Oscars in every category. I think the last time I checked now, they've added a female co-pilot or gunner or ammunitions specialist or whatever she is. That's awesome. I gotta be honest, I have not yet backed it even. So you don't even have my 3 hundo Hasbro yet. And we're still blowing away these numbers. That is incredible. And I want to send a huge congrats out to everyone in the community that has backed it already. And even those who haven't, or who have just shared and talked about it. The showing up like this when they do things like HasLab is such a huge thing, and really shows Hasbro the strength of the brand. And, that's what we want more of. We want more GIJOE. And we want more, things like this. Again, I don't I don't know that I need, personally, for my collection, just the space that I have and the way, my collection, I don't know that I need a classified scale $300 his tank. But I'm gotta be honest, I'm probably gonna end up wanting it by the time it's all said and done. So you never know. I mean, this I think the HasLab doesn't it go through September? Like, what could they keep adding tiers? Like, there's nothing stopping them, right? The 8th tier is just a terror drome. That would be amazing. So congrats to everybody for really showing up. It's awesome. And obviously to the people at Hasbro, to the minds behind this HasLab, whoever, came up with this and cooked this one up, you guys nailed it. You put your finger on what the audience wanted. So that's awesome. That's really awesome. I know a lot of people are starting to get their Hasbro pre-orders for that Spirit Storm Shadow line. I think mine shipped today. I got a couple emails. I'm also waiting for that RPG, the die and the screen, the Game Master screen. So everything's coming up Joe these days. Very exciting. Now, you know what else is really exciting? Our sponsor, the Movies in a Meal podcast. You guys should give them a listen.
Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie. It's about not 2 movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out 1 episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show.
All right, we're back. So now we're going to get into our segment.
You were saying?
Where we look at other comic books that were on the shelf the same month as G.I. Joe 131. Now, this is cover dated December of 1992. We're going to start over at DC Comics. And there really is, there's a few good stuff. To be honest, there's a few good books on the rack that I can see off the top of my head. Batman Adventures issue number 3 has the Joker in it. Any Batman adventure story with the Joker is exciting for me. Dead Man Exorcism Volume 1, number 1. This is Kelly Jones's Dead Man. And it's really, really good. Kelly Jones, if you don't know his artwork, it's very inspired by like John Tottlebean and Swamp Thing creator. He died just a few years ago. Well, hold on. I got to pause this because I can't forget this. Bernie Wrightson. I paused it for about 1 second, maybe 2 seconds, and Bernie Wrightson jumped in my head. Yeah, but Bernie Wrightson. So he's very Bernie Wrightson, very John Tottlebean, Steve Bissett. I see some Steve Bissett influence there, and just his stuff is great. Kelly Jones's stuff is great, and he did the Batman Red Rain. He's got this. It's cartoony because it's definitely not, you would never accuse a Kelly Jones drawing of being realistic, but he's got these like his characters look like walking skeletons. Even when he draws Batman, it just looks like a pile of like flesh draped over a skeleton, with some muscles in some places, and the rest of the body sometimes is just the skeleton. It's fascinating. It's fabulous too. It's really fabulous. So this is him doing Dead Man. And then based on Red Rain and then this Deadman stuff, he would actually finally be on the Batman books in a couple of years' time. But he's not there yet. But so the Deadman Exorcism series is really good just because you get this Kelly Jones Deadman, which is awesome. Like he absolutely looks like what you would want a dead man to look like. It's great. So, Guy Gardner continues on issue number 3, so on and so forth. What are we talking about? Actually, I didn't realize this was the same month. So before we get to the real big one, I was going to kind of tease it. This is actually huge. Legion of Superheroes number 38. We've talked many times about my love for Legion. They blow up the planet Earth. Spoiler alert. Yes, Legion 38 actually destroys the planet Earth, and not in a we're going to turn back time and fix it kind of way. In a the Earth is done. We've just blowed it up real good, and now we have to live in space colonies for the rest of the series way. Like it, and they really do it. I think this series goes on for another 30 some issues. So that would be about 3 more years. And with the Legionnaires book, they really would. They lived in these space colonies. Like they blowed up the Earth. It was wild. It was such a cool move. And that's what happens in Legion 38. The Spectre number 1. This is a good month for DC. This is a glow in the dark cover with Tom Mandrake doing the pencils and John Ostrander writing. It's criminal that this Spectre run has not been collected in an omnibus. I'm fairly positive it hasn't. And if it has, then shame on me for not knowing that. The reason I don't know it is because I have every single issue and I don't need it. And I treasure them because they're so good. If you've never read the Spectre, it's he's a cop. He gets killed and then God sends him back to Earth as his spirit of vengeance. Very Ghost Rider-y, but this Spectre's literally from World War II. So Ghost Rider kind of took it from him. He's got chalk white skin and he wears, like a green cape. And this iteration of it really went back to the roots of like kind of horror, like crime horror, where they had him dealing with real crimes. And then he would use his powers to do terrible things to the people that were committing the crimes. It's not just like you get justice and you go to heaven. It's like, or you go to hell or whatever, or you go to jail or, it's like, no, your justice is to be eaten alive by the cannibal drug addicts that you fomented with your bath salts. You know what I mean? And then these giant cannibal bath salt monsters would come out of the street and eat them. Things like that. It's great. And they just did a wonderful run. And I think, this series ran 5 years. So that puts it around issue 60. And Ostrander and Mandrake were on it for most of that run. It was just a special run. So the Spectre number 1 is on the stands. But of course, the big book that I'm skirting around here is The Death of Superman Begins. Back here in Man of Steel number 18, it's the first Doomsday. Doomsday is on the cover. He's still wrapped up in that green suit with the cables wrapped around him that he was, trussed up and somehow imprisoned underneath planet Earth in. And so now he's fighting his way back up. It also crosses over into Adventures in Action. I believe this part 2 is Adventures of Superman, and then Action Comics is part 3. And then it also this month crosses over into, of course, it's also in Superman number 74. And then it's in Justice League number 69. And where the Justice League fights him and he puts a hurting. Like, I think he either cripples Booster Gold or kills him. And then Beetle has to kind of revive him or something like that. I thought he just like really crippled him. But he just tears through the Justice League. The Justice League, granted, wasn't A-listers at the moment, but they were a big part of this too, so you have to include them. If you've never read Death of Superman, they did just reprint the omnibus. It's worth it. It's great. It's interesting. The character is supposed to be like a pastiche of a little bit of the grim and gritty that was happening, that was really just starting to happen with Image and stuff, but this was in the works before really Image started dropping, but some of that extreme stuff started happening. But he's also supposed to be kind of like Hulkish too, in that sense. And they've talked about, they just wanted a mindless, just force for force monster. They didn't want someone that can like outsmart him, because then that would make him better than Lex Luthor, right? They wanted something different from Luthor that would be able to beat Superman. And so they came up with this just mindless, unstoppable rage engine. I don't know. I genuinely don't know, because I've read a lot of interviews about it, but I don't recall any answers to this. Like, if Jurgens kind of had the backstory in mind when they, at this point in time, the backstory being that he was, made on Krypton, and he was kind of cloned and recloned and recloned and recloned after every time he would be sent out into and this is, thousands of years ago on Krypton. This is told in the Superman Doomsday miniseries that Jurgens did post death of, like 2 years down the road, where like they would create a little baby, throw it out in the wild, it would get killed by the elements, they'd clone it again, kill it again, clone it again, kill it again, until its genes, like its like mutation, survival of the fittest genes kind of kicked in, right? So it would survive the elements. Then they would throw it out and it would get eaten by a monster, by a wolf, some kind of Kryptonian wolf. So then they would scoop up the remains, clone it again. It would get eaten by the wolf again. But then eventually it would form a defense to stop the wolf. And so then they would do the same thing, and they would keep repeating until the clone became this apex predator of, they would make it and nothing could stop it, because every time it would just come back to life with an antidote for what killed it the last time. And that's what Doomsday ended up being. So, so knowing that, it's like when Superman kills him here, you just know he's going to come back with not being able. But it's funny though, because really Superman just bludgeons him to death, and he does the same to Superman. It's like, I'm like, he never got bludgeoned to death before. Interesting. But it's great. So Superman, Death Superman is fabulous. And so it started this month, December 1992.
You were saying?
Now, over at Marvel Comics, I can't say anything's as exciting as that. However, there's some good stuff. Ren and Stimpy show #1 is on the stands. I loved Ren and Stimpy. I was a big fan of Ren and Stimpy. I think this issue came polybagged, and it was scratch and sniff, and it smelled like either vomit or, I think it was vomit. Vomit or like boogers or something. I don't think it was supposed to smell like farts. It might have been farts, but I think it was vomit, which is really, really funny. There's a book called Spider-Man Special Edition #1, which is actually collectible. It's got a silver embossed, and I guess not embossed, but a silver logo on top that says Spider-Man Special Edition. And it's got Daredevil and Spider-Man trussed up in webs and Venom in the middle of them. And the reason it's kind of collectible is because the Venom appearance, obviously, and it's a book that a lot of people don't know about. I really don't know what the deal was on distribution on it. I just know that it's not a thing that's on a lot of people's radar, and so it's always been, $10-15, whatever. So I imagine in this Venom world, it might have gone up a little bit. But books like that, if you're ever thinking about getting into comics or collecting comics, those oddball books, there's always a good chance that better than just your average book, there's a real good chance a lot of times that they'll hold a little more value to start with, and then something may tick it off to make them real valuable. But then they never end up being, it's rare that they end up being like the most valuable type of book like that, right? Because there's rarely anything in it that other writers key off of, because it was so limited in distribution. So it's not on a lot of people's radars, but you never know. But books like this are good. There's a Venom, I think it's a Venom Summer Special or Venom Special that falls in the same category too. And I bet you it came out around the same time as this. Also always had a little bit of money in it. And then now it's just kind of climbed up a little bit, double value, things like that. So that's pretty neat. What if they're already up to number 44. To what if Venom had possessed the Punisher? Speaking of Venom, he's really having a moment this month, because he's also in Web of Spider-Man 95, and I think that's it for Venom. Oh, Punisher's also having a moment too. Punisher has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Punisher has 5 books out this month. He's got Punisher's regular series 73, War Journal 49, War Zone 10, and he has 2 graphic novels, and I use that term correctly, actual original graphic novels. He's got Punisher Black Widow spinning Doomsday's web, and Punisher Blood on the Moors, which is by Alan Grant and I think Cam Kennedy. I think Cam Kennedy. Let me click through that. Yeah, yeah. Alan Grant, John Wagner, and Cam Kennedy did the drawing. And, Cam Kennedy from those fabulous Star Wars, the Zahn adaptations. Or no, I guess he didn't do the adaptations. He did like the Empire's End and yeah, he did or did they do Heir to the? No, he did the Heir to the Empire stuff. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the Star Wars comics. Like when they first came back, he was doing the Star Wars comics. Yeah. Oh, and Punisher's also in issue 3 of that Punisher Captain America crossover, Blood and Glory, number 3. So that's 6 Punisher books. Let me see. Does he show up anywhere else? I'm sure he does. Oh, Venom's also in Ghost Rider Blaze Spirits of Vengeance 5. Yeah, so it's a big month. Although, I gotta say this. Oh, he's also in Marvel Comics Presents 117. Yeah, no, Venom's all over this month. It's Morbing Time. Morbius Living Vampire number 4. There was one thing that. Oh, yeah. So two final things to close out Marvel this month. Same as GIJOE 131. Ravage 2099 number 1. This is the Stan Lee created Garbage Man turned superhero. It's a terrible book. It was terrible when I read it. I didn't like it then. It has not grown in esteem. But it is funny because it is the Garbage Man superhero. And it always will be. So God bless him. But the other big book, and this is key. Let me scroll back up where to go. Hulk Future Imperfect number 1. This is a fabulous series. It's 2 issues. George Perez and rest in peace, and Peter David. You guys know by now. You must know because they've done a lot with Maestro recently. In fact, they're finishing up a 3 mini-series arc of Maestro, like origin stories that Peter's been back to tell, which have actually been pretty good. They gild the lily a little bit, but they've been pretty good. Future Imperfect is the Hulk gets thrown into the future, or actually gets visited and said, "We need you to come to the future to stop this guy, the Maestro." He goes to the future. He meets an elderly Rick Jones. And Rick enlists his help to stop the Maestro, and Hulk goes to beat the crap out of the Maestro, and he realizes that he gets the stuffing beat out of him, and you realize that the Maestro is the Hulk. He's an older Hulk. He's balding. He's got a big white bushy beard, and he runs roughshod over everything. He runs the planet, so to speak, or at least America. And he's not a good dude as the Maestro, and so Hulk has to figure out what's he gonna do. Like, the Maestro does live a good life. Like, he gets what he wants. It's just that he's a big jerk, So it's really a cool conundrum because the Hulk's finally stopped stopped being hounded rather by the military and stuff because he just kind of took over. But the world is in shambles, and so Bruce realizes he has to stop him, and so on and so forth. If you've never read it, it's really solid. So that's it for
You were saying?
now.
Now, mass is ready.
GIJOE 131. Start with a very green cover. A lot of green on this cover. It's Duke and his V2 look, along with it's colored like Roadblock, but I think it's supposed to be Gung Ho because he's got that bandana around his head. But he's got the color tones of Roadblock. But Duke is just ripping an Uzi fire through the chest of a battle android trooper. And the battle android trooper, this is like the V2 battle android, the green and yellow ones. And they're just getting destroyed, and this is the big assault on the pit. There's lots of smoke on the cover. It works pretty well. It does its job. Like I said, it's very green. It's a cover that kind of it's got the logo overlay on the art, which I always like, and looking ahead, the same thing next month too, which is pretty great. There's even a cool effect on the firing gun of the bat because it butts up against the corner of the G. They put the concussion of the gun behind the G, which really adds to this layered effect and looks pretty good. And then Duke's Uzi blast is actually shredding the name G.I. Joe. So that's also pretty cool. And a lot of bolts, and there's a giant screw coming out the back of the battle android trooper. So yeah, it's good. I mean, It's very imagey. It's very. I wouldn't say it's composed great. Like, like it's not. It's just but it's indicative of what's going on in the comic, and that's kind of what I've always said I wanted in comic books. So you got the open mouth screaming, and this got me thinking, because I know I've been critical of the open screaming mouth look, and it's not just Andrew Wildman. It's a lot of comics at the time, and I think what bothers me about it is it's kind of like that guitarist conundrum of you want to play wild, but you want to make it look easy, right? So Jimi Hendrix wants to, he just destroys when he plays solos, but no one looks more laid back than Jimi Hendrix. And so when I think this is what hits me, and I don't know why it took me this long to kind of give voice to it, but when I see characters working really hard like this, all the time even, but like in this case, when I see them working so hard to stop that bat, like on their face, it doesn't give that aura of I got this to those lead heroes, right? Like if you put that on a civilian, then the civilian's working hard. But in this, if you understate it a little bit and you have Duke just kind of like just giving a little sneer or even a grimace, but instead of like an open mouth, like, I can't, like that kind of garbled yell, which a lot of them do in a lot of these panels, it just makes everything so extreme and everything so strenuous that I think that's it. I think it's that guitarist element. You want to make it look easy, and when they're all screaming at the top of their lungs, it doesn't look easy to me. So I think that's ultimately it. I think that might be I might have finally put my finger on this. It's bothered me all this time.
Yo, Joe!
And I genuinely mean that. And it's certainly not just Wildman's pencils. It's a decision made by a lot of pencilers of the era and still to this day. And a lot of it is, what do you do with their mouths? Like, have you ever jumped into, have you ever popped your claws and jumped into the fray fighting a giant sentinel? No, none of us have. If we did, might we be screaming open with our mouths open when we do it? Maybe. Like, I don't know. Like that, I could see the argument either way. So anyway, at GIJOE headquarters, known as the Pit in Utah, we're checking in. When last we left it, Cobra Commander had unleashed his whole platoon of these Bat Mark IIs, and they were storming the pit before any other Cobra troopers. Well, first some of the Vipers, Heat Vipers, Frag Vipers, they did the initial assault, and then they pulled them back, and then they sent in these bats. So these bats are getting thrown out of the helicopters, breaking as they hit the ground, but then they're still marching on, and they're traveling into the pit to confront the Joes. And Cobra Commander is very concerned about having in his words, having the bats beam the signal back in relays via microwave, and any imaging problems we have, we can sweeten up with the computer. So right from the get, this is a new wrinkle to this attack that we hadn't really been privy to in previous issues, that Cobra Commander is very concerned about getting this attack on videotape. To what end, I don't know. But we know that it can't be any good.
Yo, Joe!
So this is a cool 2-page spread. So it's called Last Stand. It's written by Larry Hama, penciled by Andrew Wildman. Inker Stephen Baskerville, letterers Michael Higgins. Coloring by Bob Sharon. David Wohl is the editor, and editing-in-chief is DeFalco. It's a cool 2-page spread. And last time, I think I was a little put off at what seemed to be kind of a haphazard last-ditch stand in a random pit hallway. This illustration of it seems to be a little more organized. They've got some barricades set up. Tripwire is setting up a bunch of claymores and explosives in the area, the area of this barricade. Let's see, Duke's here, heavy duty, like I said, tripwire, repeater, tunnel rat, and they're just shooting bats. And on the other side of the page, it's just, you got bats blowing up and bats shooting and lots of smoke and explosions and things like that. So it's a real enclosed corridor kind of battle. So we're going to we'll be on page 4.
Yo, Joe!
Because that was a 2-page spread. Dial Tone's here. It's always good to see him. And he's asking about reinforcements, and Duke is giving orders that they need to be held in reserve for any flanking attacks. The bats do something that's really cool, and I really like this. So kudos to Larry for thinking of this as a battle tactic, because these bats don't need, they're robots, right? So they have a bat whose legs had been shot out, and they literally throw him behind enemy lines, and he's still shooting, and he's just, he's going attack, 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 and they just throw a bat behind the Joes, which is great. And then he just continues to shoot. He hits Outback, and he hits Torpedo. So, I mean, that's effective warfare. Although you think if they're close enough to throw a bat, you would think they would lob a few grenades, but they're robots.
Yo, Joe!
So you never know. And they're having trouble beating this bat. So Tunnel Rat's pumping it full of lead. It's not really dying. This is where we get Gung Ho, and he's got the same bandana on that the guy in the front cover does. So I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Gung Ho, but it's colored to look like Roadblock. He pops a 40 Mike rifled slug into him. Again, a lot of cool Larry, ammunition descriptions in this book. Talking about chomping down on the 12 gauge and getting some double-aught buck. They want Gung Ho to bloop a frag, which is crazy. Quite frankly, Tunnel Rat, it is wildly irresponsible for you to ask Gung Ho to fire a frag grenade behind your own lines, feet away from the rest of the team, to take out this battle android trooper. Like, that's wild. Like, I appreciate that Gung Ho recognizes, one, there would be no time to arm the grenades, the frag, so it wouldn't actually work. But two, you would just shoot your own people. Like, come on. Like, it's wild. But we do get, who do we got? Oh, Muskrat's in the mix.
Yo, Joe!
So there's a nice smattering here of old and new. So much so that it really keeps you on your toes of who may or may not get killed in this. People are getting shot, and I actually was like, ooh, is Larry going to kill more people off? Spoiler, so far, get to the end of issue, no one does die. But by littering it with new and old characters like Torpedo and Tripwire and stuff, there is that keep the longtime readers on their toes, because the last time we saw kind of a combination like this, right, was in Trucial Abysma, and a lot of Joes didn't make it out of there. So that's really cool. So Tripwire's done wiring the barricades for explosives, and now the Joes are going to get behind a blast door, and Trip's going to wait until the bats are kind of on top of the explosives before he triggers them. So they're kind of laying a trap for these bats.
Yo, Joe!
Which they do. They explode. Now this is wild. This is where I go, you redraw this panel. Like, it's exciting, and it's a comic book, whatever. But the panel that this Techno Viper is viewing the action from, in the Cobra helicopter, by the way, just exploded with a Nightcrawler Bamf, for the record, but it exploded when Tripwire's C4 explosives went off, 3 floors below ground in the pit. That's not how it's not how monitors work. It's not how TV screens work. His screen, it just explodes, and it's exciting. It's but it doesn't make any sense. So I don't know that I like it, but so the Techno Viper screen explodes, and we see that Cobra Commander points out that he was able to extract the Joe contingency plans from Firefly before they left him on Cobra Island, so he kind of knows their next move, right? So he says he wants the paralyzer set up in a picket line facing the hidden shuttle ramp, and then we cut to Duke saying, "Move it, Joes. We got to get to the special vehicles up to the shuttle launch ramp." So Cobra Commander tells us that's where he's going because he knows the Joes are going, and then we definitely get a panel that Duke says that's what the Joes are going to do. I like that storytelling. I like putting Cobra Commander saying it first and then get confirmation from the Joes, because that leads credence to him knowing it instead of him maybe having, like if you hear, even if there's no evidence otherwise, but if, like, let's say Duke had said it first and then you followed it up with Cobra Commander saying it, there's this air of, oh, is he listening in on a bug? Could he be listening on communication? Could he have a spy in the midst? That kind of, not that they're saying it outright, but the nature of the order you put him in plants that seed unspokenly in your head. By having Cobra Commander say it outright, it does get you thinking that he's one step ahead, because it gets you in the same shoes as Cobra Commander of going, oh boy, the Joes are really screwed. And so it's smart. It's a real smart storytelling technique and a good way to do it.
Yo, Joe!
And so then, speaking of Firefly, Larry brings up Firefly on that page and reminds us that, oh yeah, Firefly is back on Cobra Island. We now go to Cobra Island, and here we see Firefly. Remember, he was taking it over with the help of his battle android troopers, which are like the broken down V1s from when they were trapped in the freighter all those months ago, and the mind-wiped, brainwashed Cobra ninjas, Cobra and GIJOE ninjas. Sorry. So he's now heading towards the Cobra headquarters with all of his troops. Storm Shadow's driving one of the vehicles, and so is Snake Eyes. And it's a little expository, but it's funny that this is the moment where Firefly decides to remind himself just how much in control he has of Snake Eyes' brain, because he has to flesh it out for the reader of how Snake Eyes is going to break through it. The whole key to the scheme was finding a way to brainwash Snake Eyes. Is the most resistant to the brainwave scanner. All those doors in his subconscious. He just plastered Firefly's face over all of them.
Yo, Joe!
And it's incomprehensible that Snake Eyes could override that conditioning. He would have to divide his consciousness into all his former selves. You see this a lot in movies, where there's the bad guy explaining his insurmountable plan. And he's talking to somebody, whether it's a henchman or the actual good guy or something. And he's like, in order for you to win, all these things would have to happen. First, X would have to happen. And then Z would have to happen. So he's verbally saying that, and the soundtrack is saying that. But then the director shows all those things happening. So first, this car would have to crash into this building. And then you see a shot of, the Corvette crashing into the bank. And then, the fireman would have to be delayed. And then you see someone dressed up in a fake outfit delaying the fireman 5 blocks away to slow down the that kind of pacing. Lyra's doing that here. So there's some really good, really, really professional storytelling techniques that are being used here. And that's what he's doing here. So yes, Firefly's playing the role of exposition and making sure we understand exactly what's happening in Snake Eyes' brain. But by doing it concurrently, it just gives a rewarding payoff for what's about to happen. So in this little one-page scene here, we have Snake Eyes in his brain tearing up all these pictures of Firefly, and it's every version of Snake Eyes that we've had the opportunity to see. So you got Vietnam Snake Eyes, you've got coming home in bandages Snake Eyes, you've got like V1 Commando Snake Eyes, you've got Ninja Snake Eyes, you've got S&M Snake Eyes, and then you've got the current, what I call dog mask Snake Eyes, with like the red mask and stuff.
Yo, Joe!
So then when you get to that page is over, you just see Snake Eyes vaulting from his vehicle onto Firefly's vehicle to take Firefly on. So or actually, I'm sorry, Snake Eyes is vaulting backwards onto Storm Shadow's vehicle to unlock Storm Shadow's brain using the Arashikage mindset. I like the final panel here. Like, it's fun. I like that the dudes are ready to go. I don't know who's driving these once they stop driving them. Maybe there's an autopilot that's like follow the leader. The top 2 panels, they were a little too far from the action for me to track a little bit. what was going on. But it works. I mean, it ultimately works in conjunction with the word balloons. And, it's a comic book, so they go hand in hand. But, there's just something about the distance on those top two panels that, maybe I don't need as much to be drawn. I don't need as much in the panels. I want to be a little closer on Snake Eyes and kind of see him make these moves or whatever. I don't know. It's just there's a little disconnect there for me.
Yo, Joe!
Just for me. Now, meanwhile, back at the pit, Cobra Commander's all lined up. Some poor Tech Viper's like, this has all been too easy, Cobra Commander. Something has to go wrong. And Cobra Commander shoots that man in the face. Just straight up murders him. We should start a Cobra Commander kill count. Just absolutely straight murders that man. And he says, it's really funny. He says, just you wait and see. Oh, well, it's too late for you, but others, just you wait and see. So this is, it's funny. It's a fun gag, but it's also exactly what Cobra Commander does. It does it in the cartoon. He does it in the comic books. He foils himself. He can't win. He can't be in a position of victory. He will snatch defeat from the jaws of victory every time. So even though he's winning, his ego, his hubris, his whatever, he has to shoot one of his own dudes in the head, and that can't be good for morale. It can't be good for head count. But as this happens, all the Joe vehicles come roaring out of the giant ramp as he predicted.
Yo, Joe!
There's a really dope advertisement for the Captain America and the Avengers Sega Genesis game. It's a lot of collage stuff going on, but you've got this big Red Skull face on the top. You've got the White Vision. You've got the Mandarin, and this is the armored version of the Mandarin. You've got a super muscly Ultron. It's got to be Ultron because it's definitely Ultron based on the mouth and the ears. And you've got Hawkeye. It looks like a burn Hawkeye. Crossbones. But I think this whole thing is drawn by Steve Epting. I do think. I think that's a Steve Epting Captain America fighting Crossbones. And this is I never had this game. I used to play it a lot though. I played at the arcade. It was a cool game. It was a really cool game. I wish they did more stuff like this. Just kind of one-off. Well, they don't make one-off games like this anymore. But there should have been more of this, is what I'm saying. Anyway, back onto G.I. Joe. So Cobra Commander realizes that they just destroyed a bunch of radio-controlled trucks. So all the vehicles are destroyed, and as he's out kind of looking at them, kind of trying to figure it out, a whole bunch of machine gun fire rips apart this Techno Viper. So now he's got another dead Techno Viper on his hands. And the Joes are coming up through the camouflaged ventilation ducts. And we see that if we had stuck to the original contingency plan, we would have been mowed down, Duke. How did you know? And he says, I didn't know squat. All I knew that no plan is a secret if more than one person knows it. The real contingency plan only existed in my head. Duke, that is a terrible way to lead. Let's be honest. What if something happened to you? Then all of your soldiers would be dead. I don't think this is a good idea.
Yo, Joe!
So now Cobra Commander's caught flat-footed once again. But they really do still outgun the Joes, because the Joes are essentially just using small arms fire on them. And the Cobras have all these helicopters. So now the helicopters bring in air support, and there's lots of explosions. There's not a lot of spatial tactics being used here, right? Do you remember back in the day, I'm talking issue 8. So this goes back, 115 issues or something, where there was that big tank battle, and the book went out of its way to show you all where all the tanks were in position, and just kind of to show you how the battle went as they were fighting. That's not what's happening here. And it's okay. We're, again, 115 issues into it. We can do something different. So I'm okay with that. But it is just generally oh, now this happens because these helicopters were there. Well, what were they doing before? You know, like, were they just hanging out? Like, why weren't they already, you know, like, that kind of, it's like, it really is, and I don't think it was intentional, but it very much is like you're playing with the toys. I don't know how you guys used to do it, but it would be one thing happens, and then another thing happens, and then another thing happens, and then this guy enters the play, you know, and this guy fights, and then this guy comes out of nowhere, and he's driving this motorcycle, and that, you know, like, it was rare to kind of keep multiple attack fronts in your head because you're just one kid playing. That's kind of sort of how I feel is going on with this battle.
Yo, Joe!
And, you know, as we see, Cobra Commander is really just interested in getting footage, right? So that might be 100% might be why it's being told this way. So Cobra Commander says, you know, all right, get us out of here. So, you know, they flee. And he says, you were running the tape during all that. Did you get good, clear footage? And the Televiper says, yes, Commander, we got it from every angle. He says, good, put us on heading back to Cobra Island. And so the Joes watch Cobra fly away, and Duke promises that they're not going to get away with this. So, you know, I do want to point out that this is on U.S. property.
Yo, Joe!
This is in Utah. They now have to fly over New Mexico and Arizona or Texas or, you know, wherever to get back to Cobra Island. They're not it's not like they're you know, on GIJOE Island somewhere. They still got a fair amount of US land to fly over after attacking US soil. Anyway, back on Cobra Island, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow are showing up and facing down Firefly. All these cars are totally on autopilot because no one, I guess maybe the bats are driving them. There are no bats drawn driving them, but let's just maybe that there's a bat behind each wheel. And remember, Zorana and Cesspool are the only like Cobra High Commander there to protect the island, so we're reminded of that on this page. And then Storm Shadow is going to take on Firefly while Snake Eyes frees the rest of the gang because they're still brainwashed.
Yo, Joe!
And it makes sense because Storm Shadow really should have the biggest grudge against Firefly after Firefly revealed he was behind, ultimately, the death of the Hardmaster. So, you know, so Storm Shadow should have some, you know, some revenge in mind. And Snake Eyes very quickly undoes the Arashikage mindset, like in a stunningly fast fashion. Like he's literally drawn with speed lines like the Flash, and he frees Shebang and Dojo and Nunchuck from their aforementioned mind control.
Yo, Joe!
And Storm Shadow realizes he doesn't have to do much because Real Cobra, they've sent their forces out in force. They got some His-2 tanks coming at them. And so he's going to let the bad guys, he says, we're going to let the bad guys do our work for us. Let them shoot each other for a change while the ninjas are going to get out of there. So I'm going to say this. It may sound controversial.
Yo, Joe!
It's another book where the ninjas don't do anything. The ninjas don't do anything in these issues. So many hours later, as Cobra Commander is flying over the Gulf, he's cleared the airwaves, apparently, airspace over Arizona and Texas and New Mexico, wherever they're flying over. They almost run into the 747 that Firefly had hijacked. Cobra Commander recognizes it. Now, it says many hours later. Does that mean it took the ninjas many hours to get off that island? I don't know. They seem awfully close to Cobra Island. So what were they doing for those many hours? Who knows? That is a special mission. And it's the Joe ninjas in there, you know, and they are in that 747 heading back home to, again, do nothing. Do nothing. The ninjas have done nothing.
Yo, Joe!
Now, Cobra Commander is very upset when he lands. There's no parade. There's no band. He likes to hear Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries when he gets home, which is really funny. And this is great. The Techno Viper says there's burning tanks near the volcano and evidence of a major firefight. All the guards are unconscious and tied up. And Cobra Commander says, well, that's still no excuse to cancel the band, which is really, really funny. Like, that's a great line. Thank you, Leia, for that. That's awesome. And so they see the results of the firefight. Fireflies firefight.
Yo, Joe!
And while we never saw the action itself, we see that Firefly did overcome Zorana and Cesspool. Slice and Dice are holding them prisoner. And he says, if you want your island and your pals back in one piece, you had better be prepared to deal. And this is where it gets tricky. Cobra Commander says the raid was a raging success. He never wanted to take the pit. He only wanted to prove that the new Cobra radar suppressor works and document it for sales releases. So you remember in the very first issue, they literally, Cobra snuck up on them, and I guess that's how they're able to fly over the United States without getting tracked. So that's what he was doing the whole time. So now he says we can move to a better neighborhood and redecorate because everyone's going to be interested in buying his system to defeat the U.S. radar systems. So keep Zorana and Cesspool and the island. He doesn't care. I forgot about this. I don't remember Cobra Commander leaving the island, so I'm excited to see what happens next. Next issue, the Joes do strike back. But, yeah, so I don't remember what happens in these from issue to issue. So that's thrilling. It's a little bit of a out of left field solution to what Cobra Commander was up to, but I like it. It's totally fits within his MO, and that's a great drawing of a VHS tape. We do have a Duke profile here drawn by the fabulously talented Mark Bright. Then we got a post box from the pit with letters from Shane Schumacher out of Serena, Illinois, Jim Pike out of Delray Beach, Florida, Mike Zucks, Z-U-C-K-S, not Mike Zeck, Matt Robertson out of Jarrettsville, Maryland, David Orduz out of Chicago, Illinois, 7049 North Paulina. I used to live near there. Andrew G. Bolton out of Lauder Hill, Florida. Matt Skeets out of Bend, Oregon. Jay Ramirez out of Olympia, Washington. And Jason Stott out of Tacoma, Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this week. In 2 weeks, we'll be back with GIJOE 132, where we'll pick up. We'll see if the ninjas actually do anything, because they have not done anything. We'll see how the Joes strike back. We'll see what Cobra Commander's plan are for that naughty videotape. Is that the Pam and Tommy Lee videotape? Is that what's going to happen here? And but next week we're going to see you for a very special episode of Joe on Joe. Until then, now you Joe and Joeing is half the battle.